All right, guys, welcome back to another episode on the Landscaping Podcast, powered by Landscaping Unlimited. As always, you've got your host, myself, Zachary Small, and Shay Brickhouse. But today we've got a special guest joining us. That is Mr. Jon Rennie. John, welcome to the podcast.
Hey guys, good to see you.
Very happy to have you on. This is almost a full-blown, like a full circle moment for me. I've known Rennie for years. I've watched him grow and do many different things with his life. Shay was on the Deep Leadership Podcast, and now we've got the host of the Deep Leadership Podcast on the Landscaping Podcast. It's a crazy cycle we've got going here. Jon is a veteran. He's a former Navy submarine officer. He is an entrepreneur. He is a college professor. He is a family man. He's got a lot of lines under his signature. And so, Jon, for anything I might have missed or anything you want to dive into more for those who don't know you and want to know more about you, what is a little bit of your background before we dive into our conversation today on leadership?
Yeah, you mentioned it. I mean, I came out of college and went right into the Navy, was a naval officer on the USS Tennessee, did that for 5 years, got out, did 22 years in corporate America, basically working for other people in three global companies. I ran 8 different manufacturing businesses during that time. Then I got tired of it. So I hung up my corporate hat, started my own manufacturing business about 10 years ago. I grew that. And in January, I actually stepped down as CEO. So now I just support the business as an advisor. And my main mission now is to teach young people. So I'm a college professor teaching at Thales College, and I work on most of my students are entrepreneurial business students. So we're teaching strategy, leadership, business. We're doing teaching. I'm teaching a marketing course right now. So yeah, so just all the things. What does it take to take an idea and turn it into a business?
You know, one of the things we have a lot of conversations on are individuals who are leading their companies or they want to start companies. And prior to kicking this off and hitting record, you were talking about the role you're playing with your students who are out there doing exactly that. And so people say, for those who can't teach, but you're
Yeah,
still doing while teaching. And so therefore
yeah,
you're covering both sides of that. So that's actually pretty cool to see. Leadership, it's almost an all-encompassing thing. You can talk leadership in the family, leadership in business, leadership in communities. And so we're going to dive on that, but we're going to dive into some of the specifics of leadership that individuals and skill sets or things they can actually chew on a little bit, bring to their companies and almost apply right after listening to this podcast. And so
yeah.
I'm looking forward to having that conversation. And I guess to start it off, what was it that drove you in the direction of wanting to just learn more about this to the point where, I mean, you've been running the Deep Leadership Podcast, and through that podcast, what you're doing is talking to leaders about how they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah, I think it was, somewhat about half midway through my corporate career, I realized that I was running my businesses different than my peers, right? And I started thinking about a lot of times they would ask me, well, how are you, or why are you doing it that way, or how are you doing? And I would say it's the only way I know how. And it was like a lot of the lessons I learned in the Navy. And being under the water with 155 guys on a mission, I learned some things that would became it was part of my leadership DNA, but I didn't realize they were so much different than everybody else. So, I started writing about it, blogging and that kind of thing when that was sort of big. And then I started, I wrote several books and started a podcast, and it's sort of, now I'm working on a doctorate in leadership. So kind of diving deep in something because I noticed I was doing things differently and I was trying to figure out why. And it was a lot of it was the background of my time in the Navy that was just applying it to business ideas.
So you were on a Navy ship or submarine, I guess,
Boat.
correct? Boat. So the Navy jokes, I never get tired of hearing them all. But um, but 155 men. I mean, obviously, 155 men. That's a lot of people to lead. And so, obviously, if you're in charge of a lesser amount, then you're still having to lead them. And no matter what the amount is, I know that in our experience, people drive business, and I'm sure that whether it was on the ship or on the boat or in your manufacturing business, leading men and leading people, you find out that people drive everything, and so you have to figure out, how one person decides to run something, and then figure out what drives them and go from there. And so, your Navy background taught you that people, mattered, and then you're finding that out, I'm sure, all through life that people
Yeah.
matter. It seems that you figured that out, and so that's one of the things that I have figured out here recently. And Zach's done a great job of mentoring me as well, and seeing the importance of people. So it's good to hear people matter.
Yeah, I think one of the things, if you ever watch a commissioning ceremony when a U.S. Navy ship or boat, a submarine gets commissioned, the sponsor of the ship will give the same command. They've been given the same command for 250 years when we commission a ship, and the sponsor of the ship typically it's a woman, so sometimes it's related someone related to who the ship is named after. But for example, the Gerald R. Ford, the sponsor is Susan Ford, the daughter of Gerald R. Ford, the largest warship in the world. And when they commissioned it, she said, "Man our ship and bring her to life." And when you hear that words, the idea of bring her to life. So a Navy ship is nothing. It's just a hunk of steel with a bunch of really cool technology, but it's nothing without a crew. A ship is nothing without a crew. And a business is nothing without people. So our people bring our businesses to life, our plans to life. And I think when you recognize that and realize that people are essential to taking our ideas and making something of it, then it changes your whole perspective about people.
What a challenge that is.
Well, I mean, that's an interesting part of this, and it's one of the parts of this discussion I'm glad we're hitting now because I really wanted to pick your brain on this. And it's from this lens of you approached it and you were leading differently than others. And that's something that I found myself oftentimes asking, like, is something wrong with me? But I look at it and I'm like, it's working. My people are doing well. Those I'm leading are thriving. The company itself is doing well, but I'm different than everybody else. How did I'm irrationally confident. I believe in what I'm doing, and I'm like, listen, we're gonna crash in this direction. I believe to be true, but I'm not changing direction. I know what I'm doing is right. I believe it's true. I take input, and I will change if you give me information to let me see I'm going in the wrong way. But I believe in myself, and I believe in what I'm doing to be right. How did you find that same courage or confidence in self to do things differently than you saw other leaders doing? Because I'm sure at some point you were looking around like, well, they're all going this way, but I believe if we go that way, we'll be able to be better at what it is we're trying to achieve here.
Yeah, I'd like to say that I was smart enough to recognize that the common way of doing things was wrong, but I only did what I knew. So, for example, 5 years out of the Navy, I had moved from being in a cubicle as an associate design engineer, which is the lowest engineer they could hire, to running a manufacturing plant. I became a general manager of a factory that was in South Carolina, and I was a senior man on site. So I had 100 crew. I had 150 people at that manufacturing site, and I had never run a manufacturing business before. I had a boss who thought that I could do it, gave me the job. And so I ran the business how I learned leadership, which was in the Navy. So it's not that I looked at the way corporations were being run today and I said, it's wrong, I'm going to do it my way. I just knew, I did what I knew, and I operated the way I knew. And so I'll give you an example. One of the things I recognize is that the office people were in one side of the plant and the people on the shop floor were another part of the plant, and they never mingled. And they always blamed each other for all the problems. So the guys would say, "Oh, if the guys on the shop floor would pick it up, we'd make more money." And the people in the factory would say, "Hey, if they design the product right, we could build it right." So I recognized it was just like there was a separation. It was an us and them. And so part of it was like, how do I bring those two together? Because on a submarine, this because your military background too, is that there can't be an us and them. We have to be all on the same team, if we're going to achieve things. So I started spending time on the shop floor. And so I had this thing called Fridays on the Floor, where the first Friday of every month I spent 4 hours in working in different departments in the shop. And so I get a chance for the people to get to know me, for me to get to know the people, so I could see the real problems that existed, right? And so, and that sort of started bridging the gap between the hourly and the salary people in that plant. And eventually, we did it with all salary people. So every Friday, the first Friday of every month, we all worked on the shop floor at different departments. We rotated, and we learned so many things. We built relationships, and so we brought everybody together. And it seemed like that's common sense, right? And that's just something I learned in the Navy. Locked in a metal tube, right, with 155 guys, you get to know everybody around you, and we just didn't know each other. And the more we got to know each other, we realized we're all on the same team. The enemy was outside the four walls. But I think, so, that's just an example of where I just applied what I knew, and then it seemed to work.
You made me think of a moment where the first time I was working on Landscaping Unlimited, one of the guys, he looked at me, I was taking some photos, and he's like, "Why the heck are you taking pictures of this?" And I was like, why would I not? This is amazing. And it was like so foreign that somebody would be trying to capture this. And I was like, "Shay, look at this." He's like, "Oh, that's awesome." And I was like, "I'm going to post these things." And I kind of just started doing it. And there was no like formal approval. I was just like, it just makes sense to tell this story. I was like, we're doing incredible things. We should talk about this. And like coming back, Shay was like, "Hey man, that thing you were doing, go do more of that. And I was like, yes. And like, it was cool to have somebody. So Shay's running the business saying, I see the value in what you're bringing. And it wasn't here before. And it doesn't really, nobody else is doing this, but I think there's something to it. And he kind of gave me the free range and the digital side of Landscaping Unlimited. And it's become, I mean, to the point we're having this conversation.
Yeah.
It's like, it's taken on a life of its own. None of that would have happened had I been afraid to share it. And none of that would have happened had Shay been afraid to change things and let something new come into the company. And so it's interesting what happens when you kind of step back and you're like, it, there is value in looking at ways to do the same thing differently.
Yeah, I think great ideas come from all different places, and I think that and if you're a good leader, you're open to. And I give credit to Shay in this case, right? He was willing to listen to crazy ideas from someone who doesn't come from the landscaping industry, right? And bringing it
I'm a little
into.
crazy, man. So crazy ideas are always coming up.
Yeah, and I think that's a credit to him, because a lot of leaders will shut that down, say, well, that's not the way we do it, right? And then you miss out on this opportunity. So I think part of our roles as leaders is being open to ideas that may not be coming from the traditional way that most people get to these, these leaders, these businesses.
Well, I think that goes to, are you going to be a leader or are you going to be a dictator? You know, a leader is like a captain of a football team or the coach. No job you have is going to work without everyone you have, beneath you or beside you or above you. And so, a company means a group of people that are kind of working together. So it's a team effort, and you've perfectly explained that with you working in your business, from the corporate side all the way down to working on the floor. And if you shut down every idea, then you're basically running it as like only my way is going to work, and you're not open to anything that could excel, your business growth. And part of that is Zac, bringing ideas to us, and I like to listen to all ideas because, for one, I don't know everything. As much as I like to tell my wife I know everything, I don't. And so you hear those ideas, sometimes you go, man, that could really work. And then also it's something that they enjoy doing, and it could bring camaraderie, within the company, within the team. And before you know it, everybody's happy to be here. Nobody wants to go home, and I've got to pay a ton of overtime, which doesn't happen a lot, but it would be nice to have. So teamwork is the epitome of running a successful business, just like it is running a football team to win a Super Bowl.
Shay, you brought up an important point too. So if you do listen as a leader to someone's idea, right, you implement that idea, think about the ownership that person has in that idea, and so you're not, to your point, you're not having to be a dictator, because they have some passion about this. They brought it to you. You say, yeah, let's do it. Now they own that. And so now you have someone else pulling the cart. You have some, in other words, instead of you pushing all the time, now you've got more people pulling the cart, and more people, that are part of helping the business succeed. And they're getting to do it on their terms, or things that they came up with. So I think, and when we don't listen and we shut them down, right, then they're going to just do the bare minimum, right? They're not going to say, well, they don't listen to my ideas. Why should I even try? Right.
Yeah. I mean, 100%, like I've got the logo on my shirt here, and when the guys go home, they're wearing their logo. And so if their idea gets implemented, well, they feel like that logo is them too, not just me, or not just, the owners of the company. They feel like they have some skin in the game. They have a little bit of weight in what it is they do, and they love it because, for one, all the work they see is like, hey, I did that. Not, yeah, my company did that. They feel some sense of pride in being able to say that, yeah, Landscaping Unlimited did that, or whatever company it is they work for, because it was their idea, and then they were able to keep moving with it.
Absolutely.
What I think is cool, especially so looking at this from the green industry, or I would say even the blue collar industry, a lot of manual labor type positions, it's you go there and you do your job, and it's a very like gritty world, and that's almost the beauty of it. That's the allure to a lot of men, is like you want to do that, and there are some women too in these fields who are just crushing it. I have to say that because we have a lady who works for us, and I forgot her one time, so I always include ladies are also in the blue collar industry. But I say shout out to Miss Beth. I say that because when I was looking at the guys, Shay brought up the black shirt that he's wearing right now. And so we have kind of this program we've sort of created where there's supervisory roles or guys who stand out at what they do, and we call it the black shirt. And so it's that polo shirt right there, and you're rewarded with that. It's to recognize those who are going above and beyond consistently. And we recognize two men today, OD and a guy named Justin, so I got to give them a shout out too. And just consistently, they're out there doing it. Now, in our industry, what are they doing? Well, they're doing their job. But if you're doing your job and you're doing more than the minimum, you're doing more than the bare 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 minimum, you're doing more than but you're never recognized. At some point, it's like, why am I doing this? And it's like that is an intangible skill set for a leader to have, to recognize in every industry, that if there are individuals who are going, they believe in your mission and they believe in doing more, and it's a personal standard they have, but it's also something they're doing with your team name on it. So Landscaping Unlimited, they're carrying that torch further than you asked them to. And so the recognition of that, I think that speaks volumes. And that goes for every leader, that yes, these men are doing their job, but they're also doing a little bit more, and they're bringing a little bit more. And it's important that we recognize that, because if you don't, well, then what you're doing is you're allowing somebody who would be an A plus player on your team to either slide down to a B because they're getting that treatment, or to go find another team to play for where they will be recognized. And so
Yeah.
these intangibles, where you're in this tough industry, you still have to recognize people and show some compassion and recognition for the effort that they're putting into what it is they do.
Yeah, my favorite leadership author is Ken Blanchard. He wrote a book called Catch People Doing Things Right. And I've got a chance to meet Ken and have him on my podcast. And it's like, don't meet your heroes. Well, he was one of my heroes, and he was exactly like I would hope he'd be. But he talked about that idea. Like, we spend a lot of time as leaders focusing on the poor performers, right? We spend a lot of time and effort. And he says, no, catch the people that are doing the high performance and that are doing things right, right? And recognize them. And suddenly now you're reinforcing good behaviors instead of spending all your time sort of dealing with your problem employees and the problem situation. We should spend more time with the people that are knocking it out of the park than we are the people that are struggling. And I think we naturally, somehow, we always focus on the negative, but I think we when we focus on the positive, we're going to have a much larger impact on our organization.
100%. I read a quote the other day that said, behavior that you do not address is a behavior you just approved.
Yeah.
And, we're not saying our leaders have like issues that, we need to address, but by addressing them as doing above and beyond, then we're now saying, hey, this is the type of behavior or the type of leadership that we want to see in the company. And so we're approving it, and everyone below them sees that and goes, man, I want a black shirt. Man, I want to do what they're doing. And before you know it, Zach's got a good quote here with the boat and the tides that I won't butcher up, but it has, bringing the morale of your company up is kind of what these black shirts do. And I'm glad to see that implemented. Side note, that was also something that Zach brought into the company. So another idea that was Zach's, and I'm glad to see it acting.
Now, I appreciate you listening to me on that. So it worked out. So back to leadership. So Rennie, I want to shift gears a little bit and look at the professor side of your life and all the students that you're teaching. There's this, I don't know if it's a myth, a theory, just accepted like mantra, that leaders are born, they're not made. And I'm wondering, based off what you've seen of all the students coming into the pipeline of your program, are these individuals who share with you that they've always been this way and they've always been leading the way, standing in front of the group? Or are they coming to you saying, hey, I wasn't always like this. I found this, or I found a passion that I have, and this passion sparked a sense of leadership into me to where I wanted to drive forward in this area. What are you seeing? Are you seeing that they're leaders from the beginning, or are you seeing that they're kind of finding their way and becoming leaders later in life?
Yeah, what's interesting is that only about 10% of people, research shows only about 10% of people are born with natural leadership abilities. And so you see them, they're leading right from when they're 9 years old, 10 years old. You can see them on the baseball field. You see them in sports. They're natural leaders, but the rest of us have to learn. Right. And I think that we've got a mix, in students that I'm teaching. Some are naturally entrepreneurial. They're natural leaders. They're natural they want to change the world, and they have large goals, and then we have others that are trying to figure it out, and so I think that people come to, at least in our college, and they're thinking about running a business. They come to us a lot of different backgrounds. Some have family that have been entrepreneurs, and they sort of say they're going to be the next generation entrepreneurs. Some have seen their father or mother work in the corporate world for years, and they don't want to live that life, right? So I think it's a mix, but I would say the minority are naturally born with it.
Good. Let's try to put that to bed.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. You either, most of the time, you have it, or you have a trait that you can fine tune to be a good leader. But if you don't possess drive and willpower to move forward and do above and beyond, then leadership's pretty hard to do.
Yeah, and it's a little bit like, like you guys use a lot of heavy equipment, right? The first time you use a piece of heavy equipment, you suck at it, right? And I think
Yes.
it's the same thing with, and I can speak because it wasn't until I started my first manufacturing business, which was 10 years ago, that I ever drove a forklift, right? I always had people drive forklifts in my factory. I never drove one myself. So, but the point is that leadership is the same way. You got to do it to be good at it. So
Yep.
you can't expect the first time you ever lead to be really good at it. So it's a matter of this is a field like any other that you have to spend time doing it to get good at. You can't read a book. You can't read a book about how to drive a forklift and then and then be able to do it, right? You have to manually do it. You have to feel the feedback. You got to see what works, what doesn't work. It's the same thing with leadership. You have to do it to be good at it. So I think when I have young people in my organizations that are showing some leadership tendencies or have a desire to get into leadership, we give them small projects to work on where they actually get to lead a team of people to see a couple of things. Is one, do you like it? Two, are you good at it? Three, what did you learn through it? And sometimes they'll come back and say, I don't want to do that anymore. That's not what I want to do, right? Or sometimes, hey, I love it. It's the greatest thing we've ever done. I want to do more of it, right? So I think to be a leader, you have to do leadership. You actually have to practice it to get good at it.
Zach, you look like you were going to say something a second ago. I didn't want to cut you back off
Yeah,
with
no, no,
another.
no, no, no. I'm glad I went with that. So one of the things that I was wondering is with these individuals that are coming up, how how do you prepare them for the feeling of like it's on you? Like as the leader, there's always this sense of like I can do more or I'm not doing enough, like kind of the same variation of the question. But the leaders like they're it's like the burden of leadership. Heavy is the head that wears the crown. You always want to provide more, do more, be better, have it operate smoother. How do you prepare the students? And you kind of gave a test run there. You put them in the group, but that feeling is almost inevitably going to come into your life. And I would say for all high performing individuals, that is something that you feel, and you've got to learn like what's your way of processing it. I had to learn how I would deal with that. Shay and you guys had to learn how you dealt with that. There's just this sense of I could be doing better or I should be doing better, but it can't be destructive. So how have you found a way to prepare your students to handle that when they start to feel it, to not let it shut them down, but rather kind of twist it a little bit so it's fuel instead of an anchor?
Yeah, I use the analogy of the difference between a driver and a passenger. So, and I also say that you're in the analogy is you borrowed a vehicle. So you borrow a vehicle, right? And you're the driver. Okay. So what are your responsibilities compared to that of the passengers? Well, your job is to get to the destination that you're going. So say you borrow a car to go on a ski trip. Your job is to get to the destination, right? And take care of the vehicle along the way. Make sure that nothing gets damaged so you can return that vehicle safely. You have that responsibility. Now, the passengers in the passenger seat, they can be on their phones, they can be listening to music, they can be distracted, right? But as the leader, you have to be focused on the destination. And when I talk about the car, it's the business. So your job is to get the business, reach the objectives that the business is trying to achieve, and then and take care of that business, keep it safe. And so you have a different level of responsibility when you're leader. You are the driver and not the passenger. So you should have that responsibility. So I think that's an analogy that I see tends to work with young people, especially when they, we talk about being a designated driver. It's like, oh, well, you have a responsibility now. You got a bunch of drunk people in your car. You got to get them home safe, right? And it's you're the driver when you're the leader. And I think that young people, that's really the most important thing, is that to recognize that my first book is called I Have the Watch, right? When you are the leader, you have the watch, and this, Zac, from your background. So when you have the watch, you're responsible for whatever the place you have the watch for, but the mission and the people that you're assigned to during that time. And it's the same exact thing when you're a leader. You have the watch, it's your responsibility. The people and the mission are your responsibility during the time that you have the watch. And so those are the analogies I give to young people coming into leadership roles, so they can understand that you can't just do whatever you want now. You actually have the responsibility for the business and the people.
Well said.
Do you think that the want to be a leader is shrinking
Mm.
as we grow, in the world today, where young people aren't wanting that weight or responsibility? I mean, since you're teaching it, I'm sure you can I don't know how long you've actually been teaching as a professor, but as far as enrollment statuses of the college goes, more people attending or less people?
Yeah, I think that it's a great question. I think less and less. I think there was what's interesting with young people today is that there's so many different career choices, right? It's not like it was 20 years ago, right? So there's a lot more career choices. So we're seeing people purposely choose roles where they don't have to work with other people, right? Maybe they're a content creator or what have you, or they're they do web design or something like where they're like a solo entrepreneur where they do gig work and what have you. See a lot of young people gravitating towards those roles. But one of the things that I always ask when someone says I want to be a leader, right, or I want to get into leadership, is the question is why? Why do you want to become a leader? And I would say this, and I've observed it for 30 years, is the best leaders become a leader because they want to make a difference. The worst leaders become a leader because they want to make money. And so if you're just in the leadership game because you want to make money, you want the corner office, you want all the perks, you're going to be a crappy leader. And I've seen it time and time again where people are doing it just for themselves and they're not doing it for the mission or for the organization. They're trying to make money and not make a difference. So there's a big difference between that. And so I think understanding the motivation of why you want to be a leader is the most important first step.
That's an interesting point. And I've explained before in the past, a lot of my positions that I found myself in that are leadership positions, like I got there accidentally. All I was
Yeah.
doing was what I thought was the right thing to do, and somehow I just ended up in charge. And I'm like, I don't even know how that happened because that wasn't the intent. But then you're there, and it's like, all right, you've got to understand that the title changes nothing. You're just an individual with different responsibilities. And I think that's an important point too, because you said the worst type of leader is the one for money, but I think it's the one that's for the power. I want to be in
Yeah.
charge so I can control people. I can be the one to point the finger because it's like that goes to the head and it almost like takes you away from what the goal is for the team to go and win, not for you to get to Shay's point, perfect example. The phrase he was trying to remember or was going to bring up for mine is it's be the rising tide, don't be the rocket. The rising tide lifts all the boats. The rocket goes by itself. I want everybody to win. I want Landscaping Unlimited to win everybody that's a part of this team, not Zach. Not hardscape, not just landscape. I want all of us to go and crush. And because of that, that's where you get the camaraderie. That's where you get that connection where you're all on the same team. You're all in the same boat. And it's like when you look at the individuals they close the door and they don't let the team come talk to them, or like you said, they're divided. Well, that's when things start to break and fall apart. And you're like, but I'm in charge. Right. You're in charge of the ship that's sinking because you're not out there with the men plugging the holes and working together. And it's one of the things that I think for anybody that's listening to this, in this conversation, you're looking at leaders from three different areas who have three different experiences, but we're all agreeing to the same thing. If you're looking to lead, you've got to make people a part of this. Leadership is a people, field. Just as we say landscaping is a people business. We solve people's problems with their properties. They have a vision they want to bring to life and they can't do it themselves. We build that. Or something's wrong with their property and they can't fix it. Cool. That is what our job is. We are professionals at this, and that's what we go and do. But if you get rid of the people, I've said the same thing as you with the submarine, except I use the carrier as my example. I've got 60 jets, I got all sorts of machine guns, and you got 5,000. You could have 5,000 people, but without those people, it's a floating city. It's just a piece of metal. You put the people in it, it works. You put the clients in it, you put your teammates in it. Now you've got a company. Now you've got somebody to go and provide a service to.
100%. I originally, when I asked that question about are we seeing leadership, decline or increase, with the youth, is because I'm not the oldest guy yet. I'm only 33 years old right now, and I'm building an industry, or I'm working in an industry here, building a company that it's going to need a lot of leaders. And we're in the rural area versus densely populated metropolitan area, and so finding people that want to be leaders, in our industry seems to be pretty tough. We can find plenty of good labor that guys want to come in and they just want to work, but they don't want that weight, that added responsibility because they want to clock out, not think about work at all and go home. And so, you as a professor, that's why I wanted to know is what are you seeing just kind of across the board, as population goes. And I think you answered that perfectly, which kind of frightens me a little bit
Yeah.
because we're as society grows, I mean, there's a need for leaders. If everyone becomes a follower, well, before you know it, we're like sheep. We're just circling around we're following one sheep instead of people going their own way and finding their own path. And if anybody goes back and kind of listens to the podcast on the deep leadership, I remember one of the things you asked me about, how did I find my way in leadership, and how did I find my style? And originally it was I followed other leaders and I did kind of what they did. And I realized that wasn't for me though. And so I kind of had to find my own style of leading. And so as much as we're talking about people are born leaders, but they need to be taught certain traits, that's true. And I hope that if you're a younger person listening and you're worried about the weight or the responsibility of leadership, just know there's not one way to do it. It's put the people on your team first and make sure that they're happy, but also learn that there's a way you can do it too that satisfies you. Because I've found that over the past couple of years with me is just changing what I thought I had to be and being who I know is right, and the right way to do that. So I hope that some young people change their minds and want to be leaders and start applying, 2-year classes and get your expertise, because you're very knowledgeable in leadership. Clearly by the books that are hanging on your wall and the posters there, that Zach would probably stab me if I don't buy some and read them.
I've got them all. I'm just saying. He has stepped his game up. He's got 31 DTM.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. I think one of the things, I was just talking to high school students last week, and so my message to them, with respect to, you got AI coming down the path, right? And AI, some people say it could eliminate 50% of white collar entry level jobs here in the next 5 years. Now that's probably doom and gloom. It's probably something less than that. But I still think that if you want to stand out in the world, right, you need to be a value creator. You need to be someone who creates. The thing is, we've created a society where we can just consume all the time, right? We can consume video games or social media content or what have you. We can watch Netflix all the time, right? So we've set up to where you could just consume and be happy, right? And so what I tell young people is that, don't be a consumer, be a creator. And I think to be a creator means you got to step out of your comfort zone and do something. What is the dent you want to make in the universe, right? Are you going to just live your life where you're just going to be spending all your time, for pleasure of your own personal pleasure, or are you going to actually do something in the world that's going to make a difference? We need people that are going to step up and volunteer to make a difference. We need leaders. We need people to say, yeah, follow me. Right. And to Zach's point, it's always not necessarily the person with the title, right, that has a follow me moment where they decide, you know what, I'm going to take responsibility here. Everybody, we're going in this direction. And we need more people to step up and take those roles where they say, follow me.
I think a good point to this is, if you're leading a business and you're leading it with a follow me personality, well, the minute something happens to you, well, everyone just followed you off the cliff, you're including your business. I mean, your business went with you. And so as a leader in a business, I think the goal is to lead that business to a point where it can run whether you're there or not. Not to say you're going to get all the vacation time, because I think as an entrepreneur, if we wanted to work 40 hours a week, we'd go work for somebody else, when in reality we want to work 100 plus. But that makes a good leader, is when you can build a business or you can build a following of people behind you, that when you step out, what you built can keep going, because you led them in the right direction to where they want to keep moving forward, which ultimately is what builds successful businesses to where they can be sold. Because if it's only following you, you can never sell your business, because you can't sell yourself with it. You're stuck with it. You're tied with it.
Yeah, I mean, so if you don't ever get the business to work and run without you, then you basically got yourself a job. Yeah. You're trading dollars, money for dollars, right? But our job as leaders is to create a system so good, or create an atmosphere, a culture so good that we can step away and nothing changes, right? And so if you are the type of leader that every time you leave, everything falls apart, well, you've got work to do in your business, right? You haven't developed people. You don't have people that can step into your shoes. I mean, one of the things I learned early as a leader is to make sure that you train up a replacement for every time you're in a role, not so much for entrepreneurs, but for people who are working for big businesses. Make sure you have a replacement trained up at all times, right? Because you're going to often get the opportunity to advance and get to the next position. So you want to say, hey, look over here, Sally can take over the role. She's been fully trained. She's ready to go. And so I think part of our jobs as leaders is mentor the next generation, mentor the next group of leaders coming in, and also give them the ball, right, when it matters. Give them a chance to lead when it matters, so they get a chance to practice, and so they're good at it, so that you can depend on that person when if something happens to you or you want to take a vacation, you have someone that can back you up, and that you can trust them. And I would say this, like the person running my business right now, she started with me as an intern, right? A long time ago in a different company, and now she's running the whole business. So she started as a college intern, and now she's running the whole business. So I think that's what we should be doing, is mentoring and training up that next generation.
Have you ever had an individual who you knew had it? They had that thing inside of them to like go and dominate, but they didn't see it themselves, and their self-doubt was kind of keeping them from taking that ultimate jump to saying, yeah, like I've got it, I'm going to run with the football?
Yeah, I think so. I think great leaders will help people find, or they'll see things in people that they don't actually see in themselves, right? And I would say, like my marketing manager today, he came to me with a communications background, a communications degree, didn't know what he wanted to do, and so I started working with him, mentoring him, just start on the shop floor, learn our products and what have you. Now he's an amazing marketing and sales manager. Like, he's just naturally good at it, right? But he didn't know what he wanted to do when he got out of college. He had no idea, but I could see that he was really good with people. He was he was a storyteller. He was very interested in people's stories, and he was a good connector. And so, over time, he's learned the business. Now he knows the products, and he's killing it as our marketing sales manager. We had our largest order last month. Largest single order was almost $1 million, and it was all Parker. So he did it. Yeah.
Shout out to Parker.
Shout out to Parker.
It's cool seeing people develop like that. One of the things that I've seen develop, I would say most, since coming back to Landscaping Unlimited, is I had the conversation with Shay where I'm like, listen, man, we need to get you in front of people. And so we had set the target. I'm like, dude, like speaking, going out, just the community events, things like that. And it's happened. And Shay went up there. His first presentation was the North Carolina Turfgrass Council, which I have to like stare at the ground and focus because I always forget the title of that company or organization. So the Turfgrass Council of North Carolina. He gave a presentation there, and it was awesome. And everybody was like, there's no way I would have thought that was your first presentation. And I was like, dude, do you see? And then recently we did a middle school, we did a career day. And so Shay and his wife were out there, and they had all the equipment out and everything but a mower, because when they were coming in, Shay was basically saying, you guys know we mow. Here's everything else we do. And started showing all that and just gave the whole presentation. Like, I've been doing this a long time. And I was like, Shay, like, this is in you, dude. You have this. And it's been cool to see it, because not only is it impact, like, not only is he finding that voice, but it's also like, we're talking about future leaders. All these kids who are now getting to hear the story, because I can't tell the story of growing up in the green industry or like the experience that he has. I can talk like Zac. I can talk leadership, because that's kind of like an esoteric, like intangible thing. The hardscape, the landscape, hearing from somebody who's been in it, like these kids' eyes are wide and they're asking questions, and he's able to answer it. I'm like, dude, this is what it's all about. And so like, I love that we're able to have this conversation, because what you're talking about there with people kind of opening up and finding their way, like, we're just getting started with this, and people are already like starting to notice the change in things, and they're, hey, I saw the video, or hey, I heard that podcast. It's awesome to see this spread.
Yeah, and I would say this too, from an entrepreneur's perspective, in terms of, I teach also strategy courses, and I think part of strategy is being different. And so if you're, especially if you're talking about landscaping, right? If you're the same landscaping company as every other landscaping company in your area, right? We cut grass, we do, landscaping improvements, what have you. Maybe we do hardscapes. You're just like everybody else. So what are you doing to be different? And what I see and what I've seen in your company, Shay, and what's been happening over the past, couple of years, is you're different. You're different from every other, company out there. But I think it stands out, right? And so I think, even just going into the schools, right, and presenting at conferences, you're now saying we yes, we do this work, but we're also trying to elevate this the level, of the work that you guys do to the community, so they know, that there, there's more to this than just cutting grass, right? There is a whole career that can be had here. There's a whole, I mean, it's entrepreneurial, it's creativity, right? I mean, transformational. I mean, the work that you do, where you transform an ugly property into something that's
Yeah.
beautiful. I've seen a lot of your photos. It's just like, that's art, that's artistry, right? I mean, and so I think you're elevating what landscaping and hardscaping can be by the work that you're doing.
Yeah. I mean, Zach asked me about the podcast, and I thought it was crazy because we had literally 0 hours left to fit a podcast into the schedule. Um, but I was all on board with it because just as this whole conversation is, and so it's going to be a full circle in here. Leaders. I'm not seeing as much leaders in the landscaping industry as what I did when I was younger. When my dad ran the business, I saw a lot more people coming in here that had it, that wanted to be part of a large landscape company, and companies were growing fast at that point. And now you see a bunch of companies start, but they stay small because they just want to do it as a job, not as a
Yeah.
career, or not as something that they see as a viable source of income. And so the podcast to me isn't really so much about showing Landscaping Unlimited, even though it's powered by Landscape Unlimited. It's really to show the industry at large, and that it's not a small market, that it's something that is extremely large. There's no landscape out there that, landscaper didn't touch. No commercial building was built and finished without a landscaper showing up. And all the way from the plans, like I've got here on, behind me on the drafting table, it starts there and it goes out in the field. It's an estimator, it's an office accountant, the list goes on and on and on. And there's no end to it. So I want to advocate for the industry so that people see it as something other than just cutting grass and weed eating ditches or digging ditches, which according to most people that wouldn't pay your bills. And it pretty much put me through all my little league games. So I'm happy my dad dug ditches.
Well, I mean, think about it today. I mentioned the statistic about AI. So AI is going to replace a lot of white collar jobs, and so I think that there's going to be a renaissance in blue collar work, and people are going
100%.
to, yeah, they're going to recognize that. I have one of my students who's starting a pressure washing business, and he's got the commercial pressure. He's got on a trailer commercial pressure washing equipment. He's doing commercial properties, and he's a hustler, right? And his dream is to build a great business. Right now, his one person with the pressure washing equipment, but I can tell this kid's gonna he's gonna build a great business, but he's doing it starting off with hard work, getting dirty, getting wet, but he's building his clients, he's building his customer base, and eventually that's going to be a bigger business. But to your point, Shay, is that don't just create a business so you have a job, because you can just go get a job, right? If you're gonna build a business, and have other people involved. I think one of the things I see with entrepreneurs is we hold too tightly to too much control, and we hold things close to our vest. But the way we grow our business is start to let go and let other people help us build, they bring their strengths to the table and help us build the business. So as I meet entrepreneurs, one of the phrases I've heard is, if you want to grow, you need to let go, which is you have to let go of trying to control everything. So maybe you start off life, you make a good pizza and you start a pizza place, right? Well, that's one thing, but how do you grow that pizza business? How do you make that, a bigger entity than just, creating a job for yourself? And I think that's when people come into place. That's when you need to actually be a leader and involve other people.
I think being a good leader in that uh, scenario, of letting go, really comes back to building a good system while you're working. Because sure, everything can work fine. Like if you're own the pizza place and you're there making the pizzas, then obviously you're going to make a great pizza that everybody loves and they keep coming to get. However, if you don't have some training and a good system in place so that the next person knows how you hand tossed the pizza and how you sauced it, and how you cheesed it, then
Yeah.
obviously it's probably not going to taste the same, and so your clients don't come back. And I know in the green industry, that's usually the tough part, is making sure that someone sees the job site the same way that you see it. That way you can let go, because more often than not, when you sell a job, you sold a design, you sold the way it was going to look, and then you step off of it and you're going, I sure hope that who I put in place does exactly what I said, even though they didn't say it to the customer. And I
Yeah.
hope that they know what the customer said, even though they didn't hear it. And so I think that's when, as a leader, you have to build a good system, which is one of the things we're working on, is amplifying the system we had so that there's no clear, there's no gray areas there. It's all clear and that everyone understands it. I know Zach being here years ago and then coming back now, he's seen the way we did things then, seeing the way we're doing things now, seeing what we're trying to improve. And I think the green industry at large, can do a better job at systems, putting them in place so that your leaders can lead from afar, not from in the trenches.
Yeah, I mean, what
Go
do
ahead.
what do we need to do to replicate the process, right? We
Yeah.
can't, we can't do it all ourselves. So how do we replicate, get the same quality results without having to be involved in every single project? Sorry, Zach, I cut you off.
No, you're good. I was just thinking like that's the beautiful part and like the curse of working in the industry like this is like in corporate America, there's clear cut guidelines as to like what positions are in charge of what the pipeline looks like in the military. It's very clear. Here's how you make rank, and here's what your next rank will be, and here's what your job is when you make that rank. In this industry, it's different per company. Each company is different in who's running it, how they run it, how you get promoted within it. Are there promotions within it, or is just raises? Like, and then does your responsibility change? It's unique to each company. So it's kind of like you've got to figure out what works for you. And Landscape Unlimited's fingerprint is going to be different than in other companies. And so that was one thing. But I want to go back to for a second to your point on AI. 2 or 3 episodes ago, I addressed this directly. The green industry, blue collar jobs, I believe that those are going to be the last men standing in the years that this is going to be coming because there's no way a machine can go out and do what it is we're doing. It can aid in this field, but it cannot take the job because there's just so many variables that go into this. And the beautiful part of that is, like you said, landscaping and hardscaping, there's an art to it. And a part of that art is not just dealing with the individual person you're working with, but the terrain you're working with. It changes, like on the job, it changes. Never mind from property to property. It's unique in so many elements that you've got to be an artist that can shape things, and no amount of input a machine receives is going to prepare it for how to handle that. And so, like, there's a lot of jobs within the blue collar slash, green industry professionals that are just wide open. And I think that if you get in here now, or we get more individuals interested in growing the ranks now, they're going to get ahead once all those very highly qualified candidates later realize, hey, I've got to switch over because I'm going to lose my job to this
Yeah.
software. And so if you can get in now, you're securing your spot. I think in the future, we're going to start getting all of our applicants are going to be either licensed or certified because they're all going to be looking for something because they lost it over there. And in the same way, for a while, tech was the big thing. Well, what happened to coders and a lot of people in tech? They
Yeah.
can't. They're nothing. They're 1/1000th of the skill set that these machines have now, and so they've got to shift. Well, once you start to realize that, the certified, pesticide applicator, your pressure washing guy, he adds another certification to that.
Yeah.
There's just so much he can do that a machine cannot go and pressure wash that building the way he could, or the
Yeah.
residential properties the way that he could. And so I love to hear that. And I love to see that there are people out there who are hungry and making it work. And it's like these lawns, these houses, these properties, they didn't get themselves looking this way on their own. Somebody
Yes.
went and did that. And to Shay's point, every single one of these people are going to want a good looking home. And so I just love to see that that's the direction this industry is going because I enjoy being a part of it. It's a great outlet for like photography, kind of like that's my intangible side. And then the hardscape landscape, that's my tangible side. And I get to be an artist in both those.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Yeah, I mean, we like my wife and I, we've got a small property here, but we wanted to get some help getting it ready for spring, right? So we do most of the work ourselves in our property, but the beds were a mess. We need to mulch. We got a little storm damage from some of the snow and the ice that we got, and so we hired a guy to come out and help us out, and he did a phenomenal job. And so I have people come to me like, "Man, your yard looks beautiful," and I'm like, "Yeah, I had help, right?" So I brought somebody in that had an eye for it and had the skill set and basically turned our got us ready for spring so that now I can maybe maintain it and and keep up with it. But I think but what I'm saying is, like, in the hands of an artist, right? Like a paintbrush in the hands of an artist is something that's special, right? And you see the results at the end
Yeah.
of it. And I think that and it's like my student who's doing the pressure washing business. he films it and he puts on social media because people love to watch pressure washing.
It
They
is
just
so
love
satisfying. Have
it's
you
so
ever watched the
satisfying,
videos?
right?
It really is.
So he's got like these Google glasses and he films himself cleaning sidewalks and he posts on social
That's
media that I
brilliant.
think people are watching it like going, this is really cool. And it's because it's very satisfying, right? So, but he's thinking outside the box too. Like, how can he represent his business differently than just the average pressure washer out there?
Mhm.
I'll tell you a quick story because you said the artist, in the paintbrush. My grandfather carved stuff out of wood, and there was this big block of wood in his shop. This is I was maybe 2, 3 years old. I wasn't very old, but I've heard the story 1,000 times. And my uncle was walking through the shop, and my granddad stopped him and said, "Watch out for that duck." And he's like, "What duck?" He said, "That block of wood right there." He said, "You don't see it?" He said, "In that block of wood, there's a duck, and I'm gonna get him out." And so he went whittling and carving, and next thing you know, he had a duck. And it's like the artist can see what is there on the blank canvas. Can
Yeah.
see it before it's there. And landscapers are a unique breed because a lot of times when we're talking to clients, they're telling us their ideas, and we're simultaneously running materials, we're running colors, we're running grade, we're running water, and like we're running all that in the middle of a conversation. And by the time we leave, we've got it up here, and now we're like, all right, now we got to put it on paper. Now we got to make sure they can see it, because if they can't see it, I can't sell it because I can't get the craziness in my head, where they can see it. But I just like telling that story because my grandfather was a funny guy, and so a wooden duck was a good story.
Yeah, he knew what that could be, and I think that's the same thing with the great hardscaper landscapers. They see what it could be, right? And it's interesting too. Everyone on my block now is using the guy that I hired this spring because they all saw the result, right? And so why should you be excellent in what you do? Well, guess what? In this industry, and like a lot of industries, word of mouth will get out. And people are like, "Who did your work? It looks amazing," right? And I'm quick to tell them, who it was, and here's the number, give them a call. So I think, so that's one of the reasons we should bring excellence to everything we do too, is that the best marketing we can have is just, our reputation and our word of mouth. And especially because in the green business, you're local, right? You're local to a particular area. So if you're messing up people's properties, right, that word gets out very quick, right? But if you're doing everything with excellence, that word gets out as well too. And so it's the cheapest marketing you can have is word of mouth.
No, 100%. I often say we got to set the standard for which excellence is measured. It's what I base my life off of. Like, just do whatever it is you're doing, go be the best at that thing, whether that's photography, landscaping, painting, whittling, ducks out of wood, whatever it is, give it your all. All right, Rennie, it has been awesome talking to you. But before we go, if you had any lasting comments or just a message for those listening who are like eating this up, they're like, I want to be a leader, I'm ready to get into this industry. What would you leave them with to think on, maybe as they're going through the process and maybe they do hit some walls? What do you have as a message to all the future leaders out there?
Well, I think figure out your North Star. What have you been put on earth to do? Right. And maybe you don't know that. So maybe you don't know what it is you've been put on earth to do. So start figuring that out. So start taking jobs in the general direction you want to go. Right. But then start figuring out exactly where you want to go in your life. So what we have tons of people are just floating through life, right? Without a goal, without a mission. So figure out what your mission is, figure out what your North Star is, what's going to guide you, right? And if it is getting into the world of entrepreneurial leadership, then go do it and be excellent at it. And so get trained up, right? There's plenty of free information out there. There are books, there are podcasts. You can get a lot of stuff. You can get up to speed very quickly about what it takes to really launch a business, to be good at a business. So spend your time. But I think it begins with figuring out where you want to go in your life and what is your North Star and what's your mission in life and what does God put you on earth to do. Once you figure that out, the rest kind of it figures itself out. And if you don't know, go try some things and figure it out. And then eventually you're going to figure out the right path for you.
You took my response right out of my. I was just going to say, if you don't know, just start trying things and you're going to find out really quick. I hate this. I love this.
Yeah.
If the I love this weighs it out, then follow that path, because what's the point of doing something if you don't enjoy it?
Mm-hmm. It's a short life.
That is. Yep, sure is.
All right, Jon, thank you for coming on. For everybody, if you want to check out more about Jon Rennie, you can see all the links below of this episode. Thank you for tuning in to another episode on the Landscaping Podcast. Take care.